The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds. Producers and curious consumers around a single vision to find the opportunities to drive towards a vision that is one of inclusiveness on how we produce around the key principles of integrity, guardianship, ingenuity and respect. Now, they are the fundamental principles of Te Taiao, established in December 2019 right here on the Lincoln University campus, with the launch of the Primary Sector Council's vision set out by our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Now, hungry to commit to a single vision, farmers and growers across New Zealand have been saying that that's great, but where's the strategy? Where's the how to the why? Now, COVID-19 has shaken the world's economy into the worst contraction since the Great Depression. And New Zealand's approach to the pandemic has not only been highly respected by our trading partners, but could be the foundation for our small island nation at the bottom of the world and our economic recovery. This recovery will not have the blinkers on the foundations we have already achieved towards a confident sector based on productivity, profitability, but also how we can collectively continue to commit to the well-being of our natural world. Now, today at lunchtime, officials gathered in Auckland around Jacinda Ardern and flanked by a front row of Ministers O'Connor, Nash and Jones to present their 10-year roadmap to ambitiously add $44 billion in export earnings over the next decade. Now, it's sounding similar to another pledge I heard, and you probably all remember, 2014. Nathan Guy, Minister for Primary Industries at the time, wanted to double exports by 2025. So 2014. Primary sector exports at the time were approximately 26 billion. Our accounts last year showed we had reached 46.4 billion. I'd say on track. Serious country, we are a home to open hearts and open minds. And even though I'd like to challenge on the how to the hui, we will have Minister Damien O'Connor on the show after 7:40 to work through how his coalition government believe their roadmap will continue that trend. Their opposition has come out to say that this roadmap fails to address a myriad of issues that they've created for farmers over the past 3 years. I'd love to hear your questions for Damien in the comments below and your comments on this ambitious roadmap. You are wherever you're watching this live across multiple platforms on the web. This show is all about you and it is interactive. Wherever you are in the world, whatever role you play in consuming or producing food and fibre. Now, if we have a map in front of us, it is important to just check in and see what that magnetic north is hoping to head towards and get on board as, in my mind, there is great opportunity when enthusiasm and resources can all be applied in a similar direction. Now, I'm your host, Sarah Perry, and with you for the next hour as we delve into the matters that matter most with the great people at Farmers Weekly. And I love getting to know you, of course, in the comments below. Now, as well as I know that you love to hear the thoughts from the man behind the mask, the energy, here's the energy, the engine room to Sarah's country, J-Rock. You're a bit silent last night, but J-Rock, hey, Joel, if you haven't caught up with the news, this is Sarah's country news. This isn't the mainstream news. Joel's actually heading back when his visa expires to his home country of beautiful Northern Ireland. Joel, the hotels here in Auckland are bursting at the seams. And apparently they're looking to spread that across, that quarantine for incoming Kiwis, across multiple hotel destinations around New Zealand because they're desperately running out of places. And of course, places like Queenstown will be running out of coin. We shouldn't joke about that. It's very dire. Where would you like to be stuck in New Zealand? You've seen a few places, but is there places that you haven't seen yet?
I mean, of the places I have been, I wouldn't mind getting stuck in Queenstown, like quarantining there for 2 weeks. Even if I'm just looking out the window at the views, wouldn't be too bad. I don't know. I haven't really thought of anywhere else. I wouldn't mind Wellington. I haven't done that yet, but yeah.
Yeah, stuck behind glass, you wouldn't experience windy old Wellington. But they say Wellington is good on a good day. Now, of course, I'd love to know if there was one place that you had to isolate yourself for 2 weeks in New Zealand, where would it be and why? Let's test out to see if your thumbs are working and who's here with us tonight on the show, because we have a stellar lineup of guests unpacking the moving feast of the challenges that are facing farming, growing food and fibre. Now, listening to Green Party leader James Shaw on the radio last week, he didn't feel the numbers were that high. That's in regards to the amount of highly productive land that was being sold to convert to plantation forestry. But last week, Labour Party has decided to listen to the Right Tree, Right Place protests. And they have pledged that within the first 6 months of the next term of their government, post-September, should they be elected, they're going to revise the national environment standards for plantation forestry. So this is to enable councils to once again determine classes of land that can be used for plantation and carbon forests. So we're going to be joined after 7:20 by Chair for Beef and Lamb New Zealand, Andrew Morrison, to discuss this pivot. Is it for the positive? And of course, let's get his thoughts on today's Fit for a Better World acceleration plan. Now, following Andrew, we're going to be joined after 7:30 to continue the theme with Communications Manager for Forestry Owners Association on that topic, as well as a recent New Zealand Institute for Economic Research report on the potential impact of course, Minister Jones' Forests Amendment Bill. Highly controversial. To close, as I said, we're going to be joined by Minister for Agriculture, Damien O'Connor, following today's launch of the government's roadmap. That is to, of course, boost the sector by a further $44 billion in a decade. But first up, just 10 minutes drive from Auckland's bustling Queen Street lies a farm where our future farmers are being taught, and it is a farm he describes as being in a goldfish bowl. We are going to be joined by the home of where today's government launch was, the ASB Mount Albert Grammar School Farm, with farm manager Peter Brice. But that's all following the very latest on-farm story featuring Mount Albert Grammar. All that from Farmers Weekly. This is Sarah's Country.
A lot of kids want to throw those gumboots on in a hurry in the morning, come into the shed or move some sheep or whatever it might be. These guys, they wouldn't be exposed to this environment otherwise. It definitely feels good to see them becoming more and more involved, getting their hands dirty, wanting to be there. It's inspiring for me as well. I'm Peter Brice, Farm Project Manager at ASB Mags Farm in Central Auckland. So 8.1 hectares, we have half a dozen dairy cows, 21 Suffolk sheep. We raise calves from the excess milk that we have from the dairy cows. We've got a stream with native trees that come from a native tree nursery on farm. We put in a kiwi fruit orchard last year. Farm was purchased by ASB in 1932 from the Kerr Taylor family. Between them and ASB, they saw the need for an education facility because of the growing rural-urban divide. It was leased to Mags, $1 a year, and it's been going ever since. When I first started, there was 180 kids doing agriculture, now there's 250. That's across all year groups. This year, probably looking at 7 or 8 kids out of year 13 that'll go through to Lincoln, Massey, and the cadet farms. So I think that's a pretty high percentage on the whole of graduates, and it's pretty neat to have that feeling of satisfaction. We get a lot of visitors and they all do have an opinion on what best practice actually is, be it practically achievable or not. So you do have to put a bit more thought into what you're doing on the farm. It's one of the challenges for the property is showcasing our industry in the best light. On Sunday we've got a large community planting day, so we're looking at having probably 150 plus people from our community, and they'll do their utmost to plant 3,000 plus trees. quite a thing to stomach when you're planting a lot of your grazing land, particularly as a percentage wise when your farm's only 8 hectares, but it's all for the greater good, I think. Updating the farm is a pretty big part of my job as well. At the moment, we're teaching them with Windows 3.1, where we should be using the latest version, whatever that might be. My goal is to bring it into the modern era, I guess. New technology, more business involvement, new products, anything helps. At the moment, we're just scratching the surface with what impact that we can have.
Okay, thanks, sir. No worries. Thank you for your help. That's a nice looking fence, boys.
Comparing them to myself when I was 16 or 17 or 18, they'd just leave me for dead. They're all keen to learn. Now's the opportunity to show them what the career options are and what the industry's all about.
Now, of course, tonight, the comment theme that I'd like to discuss is, of course, they're looking at expanding beyond Auckland to deal with this massive demand on hotels for places to quarantine. Where would you like to quarantine for 2 weeks in New Zealand? I tell you what, I've got my favourite place. It's in Golden Bay, right on the beach. I could stay there for longer than 2 weeks. It's absolutely magic. Now, it's not easy being a farmer at the best of times, but when you are surrounded by townies who have who just have to look over their back fences to see, what you're up to is even more important to get it right. I lived in Auckland and I used to go to Cornwall Park all the time, and I know the pressures that they were under. Now, this particular farmer is 8 hectares, milks fewer than 10 cows, has 7 chickens, 21 Suffolk ewes, a gold kiwi fruit orchard, and a native tree nursery, which will be in hot demand now. Peter Brice is the farm manager at ASB's Mount Albert Grammar School in the middle of Auckland City and joins us now. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for taking the time to join Sarah's Country. Peter, firstly, can you give our audience a bit of background into how and why you decided to take on a farm under probably the biggest microscope in New Zealand?
Look, I love working on farms. It became fairly evident after I travelled overseas, after a short sort of stint in the corporate world and support industry for agriculture. So, this opportunity came up in the middle of Auckland, which I'm from, Pukekohe, South Auckland sort of way. So pretty handy to home. It's not probably under as much production pressure as a lot of other farms would be, trying to hit budget figures and things like that. But it's really cool. We get to work with the young people coming through and build relationships with businesses as well. So I guess there's a bit of my corporate sort of skills and that coming through with the relationship building and that sort of stuff as well, which is cool. Keeps my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the industry, along with the up and comers. So it's cool. Good balance, Sarah.
Can you give us a bit of a scale of the size of Mount Albert Grammar and how many are involved in the agriculture and horticulture opportunities that are at MAGS?
Yeah, sure. So MAGS is a public school, so funded by the ministry. There's 3,200 odd kids there. It's one of the biggest in New Zealand, if not the biggest. It's projected to be like 4,000 in 10 years. It's huge, and it's almost a small town in itself. The farm caters for 250 odd ag students, ag or agribusiness. So year 13s and year 12s do an agribusiness course, which was done created by the St. Paul's curriculum a couple of years ago. And that's really cool. They get real good exposure to business and use different businesses and contexts for their studies. So that's the ag and hort agribusiness stream. And then along with that, you also have biology classes coming onto the farm to look at ruminants, for example, as they were a couple of weeks ago. Business kids taking the honey, for example, from the beehives and putting labels on it and doing the whole marketing thing, using the beeswax for lip balms, you name it. There's plenty of other things that the farm's used for outside of straight agriculture. So it's pretty cool.
What an absolute hotspot for embracing and empowering our young people into careers into the sector. Now, I do remember actually going there in 2018 when Nathan Guy announced $12 million into it was going to be the flashiest thing out for our Centre for Food and Fibre and teaching not only MAG students but urban Aucklanders around our food production systems. Sort of where has that gone to and what is the vision for MAGs?
Yeah, okay, so there was slightly before my time. When I started here was about 2 years ago. So over that time, we've rescoped the project. So I took a short trip over to Holland and looked at a few of the classic examples there of how they use a thing called triple helix. So that's the local government, education, and business all working together. And they've got some really good examples of that happening. Successful, subscribed education centres, and we wanted to replicate that. So one of the key things was that it's a lot more down to earth, those centres. So for example, in Westland in Holland, which is a large greenhouse and glasshouse growing area, their education centre is a glasshouse. It's the framework. It's a modern building called the World Horty Centre. Really, really cool. So we took out of that sort of centre, we took, hey, maybe we need a bit more of a corrugated iron shed sort of feel to our design. So we have done that, and we've rescoped the building to create a 4-classroom flexible education hub, which would be the centre of the farm, and create a really good education and experience centre for visitors, for our students. And yeah, I think it'll be a bloody fantastic asset for our industry, not just to sit on the MAGs or ASB Banks books, like that, because that's what this is, right? This is an industry asset in the middle of the city. So I think as soon as we view it as that, the more support that we can generate.
And of course, we're talking about that being the platform for Jacinda Ardern and, of course, as I said, her front row of O'Connor, Nash and Jones today to launch what is called their acceleration roadmap for the next decade, should they be elected. Peter, how excited were the children, and why was it so important that they chose the platform of MAGs to be able to showcase the future which the children are a part of?
Yeah, it was cool. It was brilliant. I mean, the kids here, they are just fantastic. They take every opportunity that they get given, and today was a classic. They lined up on entrance and all met the ministers, which was cool. And then afterwards, they got to have a bit of a powwow with the PM, which they loved, and got plenty of photos in that taken. But I mean, these kids are all the ones that were there today were out of the agribusiness course. So they are likely, if not already, accepted into tertiary education, be it Lincoln, Massey, or some of the cadet farms. So they are all really, really good prospects for anyone looking for future staff and future leaders as well, because they are really high achievers. So I love giving them the opportunities, and I think they sort of give back to me by volunteering their services after school or whatever it might be to help fence fixers or milk the cows or whatever it might be.
Yeah, everybody loves a bit of free labour on the farm, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, now in passing, it's all well and good to have something of such hard work that you're doing, but for this government officials to fly in and fly out and promise the world, are they backing concepts like this financially? I mean, they've nearly doubled the Sustainable Food and Fibre Fund. Of course, this would be a natural fit for that.
Well, you'd think so, Sarah. We do struggle at times for that sort of support. One of the key bits of policy in that document with the Sustainable Food Futures Fund, if I've pronounced that correctly, is that they don't support any capital structures. So that's what we are trying to do. Even if we dress this up as a resource for learning, it's still a capital investment for them. So that really crosses us out of any support from the government, which is a bit of a pain. There's no allocation to any school farms from the government for funding. So be it Hauraki Plains College with their 8-hectare farm, they don't get extra money for having that. It's just seen as a resource, I guess, for learning. So it's a real pain, and it doesn't really help us progress our farm. We still feel that we're stuck a wee bit in the 70s. We're trying to improve that. We do get support from ASB, which we have since the 30s, right? So that's really cool. And there's a handful of other businesses. Planet Food is one of our neighbours here, the CRI. So they're really good to us, and a couple of others, which is cool. Even, I mean, it'd be great to mention the Kirkham group from Waikato. They supported us by donating 5 dairy cows this year, which were all in calf, and that's been a great sort of addition to our farm. Just modernising things like our herd, that's really cool.
Do you know what I'd absolutely love for every company in New Zealand that works in the primary industry? It doesn't take much to donate one thing. All Flex donating a wand, a reader, in terms of, as you said, a couple of cows here and there. We do it across the board. Wouldn't that be great to enable you with the resources that you need that don't cost a lot to our individual corporate? So I want to make that a challenge to all you listening and watching out there. What can you do to support MAGS, and 300 in this agribusiness and 4,000 in the middle of Auckland? This is an absolute massive opportunity for us. Peter, I just wanted to say thank you very much on behalf of everybody watching Sarah's Country and listening on demand for the work you're doing. It's awesome.
Yeah, hey, thanks for the opportunity. We've had a bit of media over the last week. I think a few people might be sick of me posting on LinkedIn. I did my annual post, and it was separated into a trilogy, so that was quite unique for me. But thanks to everyone for the support. It's been really cool, but we do encourage everyone to get in touch, and you can do that I'm pretty easy to find. So that's cool.
Yeah, Peter Brice, the farm manager there. But before you leave, Peter, we're talking about amazing places to quarantine, and I know you know lots of places around New Zealand. Where is the place that you could park up quite happily for 2 weeks and shut off?
Well, there's 2 places, but we quarantined here over COVID lockdown, and that was pretty bloody good, to be honest. We had full access to the veggie gardens and things, and the chickens were laying plenty of eggs, so we were pretty happy here on the farm. But Northland or Coromandel is one of the best places, I think, around the world. So that'd be cool.
100%. Thank you so much. Farm manager for ASB Mount Albert Grammar Farm there, Peter Brice. Now, next up, we're going to be joined on the phone by Southland farmer, he'll like me saying that, and Chair for Beef and Lamb New Zealand, Andrew Morrison, on the post-election pledge to turn the tide of productive classes of farmland going into trees. This is Sarah's Country.
We're a large deer farm, and very proud deer farmer at that. I grew up here as a little boy. It is just an amazing lifestyle. I could never live in a city ever again. Just the big open spaces and just the peacefulness of it all. I think deer are very majestic, very intelligent animal. Having deer that are under pressure or anything like that, or overstocked, they really don't perform as well. You should really be spreading them out on beautiful pastures, keeping them happy. A happy deer is a good deer. And good feed, good grass. We renew our pastures all the time in the paddock, so we're always getting the best quality grass. Well, I guess in the wild, though, they don't have the luxury of the grass that we put in front of them here as a farmed animal. I believe we've got some of the best English type deer in the country, if not the world. And to associate our brand with Silver Fern Farms brand works for us. Without the likes of Silver Fern Farms, then there's no point doing this. So they're very, very important for us. I'm Mark Tapley, very proud suppliers of venison to Silver Fern Farms.
Good to see some comments starting to roll in, but you're a bit quieter than normal nights. Michael Ross has said perhaps we can help these educational centres receive capital type items and funds from the agri-tech sector. Absolutely, Michael, as well, because of course a great way to attract our young people, of course, is through the use of technology. Now, as we were discussing there, if you've just missed it, we were talking to Peter Brice from the ASB Mount Albert Grammar Farm. And of course, Sarah's Country is on demand in multiple different places. Farmers Weekly's YouTube channel, great way to watch back those interviews, as well as, of course, Sarah's Country is on demand on podcasts. You can take us anywhere with you. Now, Beef and Lamb New Zealand's manifesto stated that they wish to see a limit to the amount that could be offset from trees to curb the trend of corporates, both here in New Zealand, such as Air New Zealand, and our overseas companies gobbling up our food-producing footprint. James Shaw said it wasn't too much a problem. That's what I heard on the radio anyway. But Labour have decided to pivot last week with a pledge post-election to revise the national environment standards for plantation forestry to ensure highly productive classes of land can't be blanketed in plantation pines. So, joining us now on the phone is Chair for Beef and Lamb New Zealand, Andrew Morrison. Good evening, Andrew.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good. Now, it was interesting. I was listening to Hosking interview James Shaw, and there was a real discrepancy between some of the numbers that you'd been sharing in terms of 70,000 hectares and his so-called 13,000 hectares. Whereabouts are we missing the numbers?
Yeah, well, let's start the discussion. We'll go right back to the start, Sarah. We're actually not against trees on farms. We're not anti-forestry in any way. We have a position that we actually want land use to be linked to market and go where you're going to get the best return. Now, that's linked to actually productive returns as opposed to legislative returns. So, look, you'll know, Sarah, from your history in farming, a lot of us actually like trees on farms and we integrate them into our businesses. A lot of the stuff we're going to be, we're going to 180,000 hectares of forestry integrated into our sheep beef land anyway. So let's just be quite clear at the onset. We're not against forestry. We're not taking a fight with forestry. What the conversation here is the incentives to incentivise carbon farming, which drives completely different behaviours, drives different returns, etc. So look, it's a long story to get to your question. Why have we got such difference in the numbers? The numbers have been rolled out from government. Effectively, those farms have been purchased 2018. It takes time to prepare those properties, then seeded in 2019. So that's where those figures are coming out from. Then James has stripped out the what he calls the replant versus the new plant, so that's quite legitimate. The figures that we're using are just the farms that have knowingly been purchased to go into the forestry in the 2019 through 2020 planting. So that's the figures we're going.
I'm just actually thinking about the fact that we pride ourselves so highly here in New Zealand that we have been subsidy-free, as we are talking about COVID-free, for some time. The way that the ETS is being structured is very heavily leaning on the fact of supporting carbon farming from a subsidy perspective, not only thinking about the economic flow-on effect to the regions and, of course, jobs.
Yeah, well, that's quite right. And that's our concern, so I'm not getting into forestry value adding. That's great. And they create jobs too. Carbon farming, the study we did in Morrison, about 7 jobs per 1,000 hectares, sheep and beef, 5 point whatever, can't remember, jobs for forestry when you actually take into account the harvest phases of it. But if you're carbon farming, you're only getting about 0.5 of a job per 1,000 hectares. So it doesn't provide any employment in the region. Basically, sheep and beef sector, we're a $12 billion sector. We employ about 90,000 people. That's about 5% of jobs are created by the sector. And, that's another part of it. It's just not money made on farm. It's jobs created in the community, which is important too.
And of course, the news last week that Labour have decided to revise their position on this and bringing up the class system. Of course, Beef and Lamb have utilised this for many years when it comes to profit benchmarking. But now it's about our elite soils and resource consent needed to be sought for plantation. What's your thoughts? Is this a positive move?
It's really positive that the government of the day is starting to realise it's an issue. Then our advice to them would we don't jump to solutions and address a problem in secondary legislation like RMA. Let's address it in the primary legislation, which is the ETS reform bill. Effectively, what's driving the problem is the fact that we've got no limits on the NZU forestry offset, and that's what would drive it. So we're not too sure why controlling it through a land use classification RMA. We're not a big supporter of that, basically, because then you'll get some central planning organisation or even down to local government say you can plant your carrots on this block of land, but you can't plant your carrots there. You can plant your trees here, but you can't plant your trees there. So from our point of view, we'd much rather it was addressed in that primary legislation.
I was just actually thinking similar to about jamming the inputs in at a fast level, high on sugar, but of course pulling the reins back as tight as you can on the outputs level. Of course, what we're focusing on with regards to our water situation, Andrew. But I mean, the thing is where do you think that we can actually decide to nurture some of the support around RMA reforms, especially with a minister who wants to continue to ensure that environment is above all else?
Yeah, well, we'll we would like to constructively engage with government as we always do. We'd like to point out that there's a real flaw in doing an RMA point of contact. We'd much rather do it in their primary source. At the heart of it all, Sarah, what's the problem we're trying to address here? And it's actually greenhouse gas emissions. So you'll be well aware of the Hayward data, which we're building the on-farm ability to measure at a farm level of sequestration and emissions and mitigation. So, on the farm, we're addressing our issues through that process. This is the fact we're offsetting fossil fuel emissions from industrial or transport or whatever on our farm. One farmer said to me, I'm not interested in parking pollution on my farm. That's not actually going to achieve the goal of reduction. Yeah. So that's the thing we want to be quite clear about. The goal is to reduce fossil fuel consumption. It's not around offset. The goal is not to put New Zealand in trade. And do we think this legislation is going to deliver that?
Okay, we're talking about this roadmap announced today. And of course, it clearly states to be a low emission economy, we need to reduce biogenic methane by 24 to 47% below 2017 levels. Well, that's a change in terms of date. But how do you believe, when you had a bit of an overview through this, it stacks up in terms of our existing aspirations and visions as a red meat sector anyway?
Yeah, look, well, I think this is actually really interesting because we actually do need a plan for the sector. The COVID has demonstrated how important our sector is to export revenues for New Zealand. And that's right across the agri space. That's dairy, red meat, horticulture, viticulture, forestry and seafood. You see, so this is where we're not having an argument with forestry, we're having a discussion around carbon farms. So, look, this strategy today was actually, this comes from the Primary Sector Council, and it's put some really interesting concepts out there around there. The concept of wellness linked to a Maori concept of taiao. I think it's a brilliant sort of a of the decisions you make. So simplistically, the back work is blanket afforestation. Does that meet the taiao goals of wellness for communities and wellness for the land? So this is the challenge we've got as we come up with the strategy, which I think is great. Then how do we back work into a lot of our policy?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chair for Beef and Lamb New Zealand, Andrew Morrison, joining us there. And absolutely 100%, if we don't have well rural communities, then we don't have a bustling, doubling, as this aspiration is, primary industry exports to ensure our recovery and be fit for a better world. Now, next up, to continue the discussion on forestry policy, we're going to be joined by Communications Manager for the New Zealand Forest Owners Association, Don Carson. And not only on this, but also a new report by the New Zealand Institute for Economic Research saying that government shouldn't meddle in what's not broken. That's, of course, the Forest Amendment Bill. All up next on Sarah's Country.
This is Sarah's Country. The recipe for perfect beef and lamb. make one small fresh country. Make sure it's nice and remote. Now, keep it at the ideal temperature all year round. Next, mix in the farmers. They go perfectly with the nature of this unique place. Add regular sprinkles of rain to really bring out the lush meadow grass. Then let your animals happily graze on this grass all day, every day. And there you have it, New Zealand, the perfect recipe for beef and lamb. Taste pure nature. This is Sarah's Country.
Every morning, Kiwi farmers wake up to produce high quality food. Yet, every night, some Kiwi families are going to sleep hungry. Meet the Need is a charity founded by farmers, and it's here to change all that. We're about New Zealand farmers feeding New Zealand families by donating a small part of what we grow when we can. You can help us make sure no one in New Zealand goes to sleep hungry again. Visit meettheneed.org and follow us on social.
Welcome back to Sarah's Country. Of course, tonight in the comments, we are discussing of course, if you were to quarantine, and how horrible it would be to be in one of those Queen Street Auckland hotels. The reason we're talking about this is they are bursting at the seams and, of course, trying to spread across the country. And wouldn't it be financially beneficial to places, especially like Queenstown and Rotorua? But should you have to need to quarantine coming back into this country, where would it be? As I said earlier, one of my favourite places in New Zealand is Golden Bay. Absolute heaven. I'd happily be there for longer than 2 weeks. I'd love to know who is watching with us tonight in Sarah's Country. Of course, the regulars popping up in the comments below. And where would it be? We had Peter Brice on earlier, and he is a big fan of the Coromandel. Now, I actually went to Waihi Beach in the Coromandel this weekend, celebrating becoming an auntie for the first time. And what an absolute beautiful part of the world it is. Now, as we get Don Carson from the New Zealand Forest Owners Association on the line, and then of course followed by Minister Damien O'Connor, I'd love to see who is with us. Where are you watching? All you simply have to do is type in the comments below in Facebook or of course YouTube, wherever you are across multiple platforms that we stream to. Loving the comments coming in here, of course. John Williams, love the ambitious targets the government are making. However, their track record of ambitious targets speaks for itself. Yep, there has been a lot of headline policy, John, and of course, you know, to be fair, it has only been a couple of years, but it has been an impactful couple of years for the sector. Paul Harris, the targets are political folly. Yeah, in terms of we're discussing regarding carbon farming, and I think there was a really great interview there with Andrew Morrison, and of course he's explaining how it's about political, legislation at the top. And I think we're joined on the phone now by Don Carson. Right, now diverting logs from an efficient sector, this is plantation forestry, to an industry that is less competitive on world markets would have a detrimental effect on New Zealand's national income. That is a statement made out of a recent report by the New Zealand Institute, Institute for Economic Research. And we're joined now by Communications Manager for, as I said, Forestry Owners Association, Don Carson. Good evening, Don.
Good evening, Sarah.
Good.
And before we start, can I give a great shout out for Peter Brice and the Mount Albert Grammar School? Great idea, gets school kids in from Auckland to experience agriculture as much as can be experienced there. Great idea.
Fantastic. And of course, they have a native tree nursery there, Don. Are they going to learn as well about plantation forest trees as well? Pine trees?
Well, I've been out to that site and we tried to work out how you get a plantation forest operating at Mount Albert. But I think we're going to be the sector that is the poor cousin, as we so often are, in that venture. You really need some more space than Mount Albert Grammar Farm has to show people forestry.
It has been a very interesting time when we're talking about this detrimental impact on New Zealand's national income. You've sort of been squeezed from both sides, where there's been sugar added to the cereal, which is regards to 1 billion trees and a lot of money going into plantation forestry. But at the same time, the reins pulled back by the government to be told what to do against market forces.
Yeah, well, okay. I mean, it's all in the context of the Fit for a Better World idea, which I've had a look at, as has everybody else. And it's very rich on words and short on specifics. And I've been around for long enough to go back even before Damien O'Connor's predictions about how the economy is going to increase from primary export in production, and go back to Muldoon's Think Big days. And what caught my eye really on this Fit for a Better World is we need to be very clear we are not a volume producer. And that goes back also to Shane Jones's bill. It's all very well trying to add value, but you need markets and you need to be able to develop good products. And you need to be able to do that without losing the efficiency of the volume production that we have. We are a volume producer. Fonterra deals 30% of the world dairy trade. Kiwi Fruit from New Zealand and affiliated under franchise to Zespri is a major dealer. So we are a volume producer, and we need to also, as well as add value, add efficiency to the volume we're producing. And simply to say that exporting logs is not a good idea, no matter how efficient those logs are in being produced, to supply often very inefficient and archaic mills around New Zealand to mop up employment, which I think is a government job, not an export sector job. And that's why we were supported in our opposition to that legislation by Beef and Lamb, Federation of Maori Authorities, the port companies, executives, heads, the international exporters, and a whole line of others, in particular Farm Forestry Association. So it's this idea that you add value and you do it by ransacking the export sector has never happened before in New Zealand history. Never happened before. Not even when Muldoon was trying to exercise all levers over the economy. Even he never tried that. And that's what that bill is about. But it's in its second reading, may go through. The other side to that, of course, is that when we talk to the international community about increases in tariff barriers and trashing 30 years of work on a trade rule-based international system, and then we're doing exactly the sort of thing that we're telling the rest of the world that they shouldn't be doing, then we're in deep trouble. Also, Sarah, I want to talk a little bit.
Yep, continue.
Carry on. You asked the question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, though, with regards to, and, you know, this is Sarah's thing. Hang on, there we are, we're back. Shane Jones is very concerned about China taking over and not needing our logs anymore.
Not needing our logs. We deal in all of our primary production with a very dangerous world, and especially post-COVID, where there are all sorts of international barriers going up. And the biggest threat to our log exports going into China is a result of climate change in Europe, where all these spruce damaged logs are being salvaged, early harvested, put on trains, shipped across Siberia and deposited in the Chinese market at a very competitive rate. That's our biggest threat. not the fact that we have a lot of logs going to China. But if you say you divert all of this into a domestic processing industry, where are those markets? And it's very easy to come out with formulas, as the Fit for a Better World has done, without saying, first of all, we need to make sure that we have got markets. And that's one thing the NZIER report identifies. Says, for instance, the Australian car manufacture industry, millions upon millions of dollars pumped into it by the Australian federal and state governments, and eventually it was a failure because they just simply couldn't compete.
Yes.
But I also, Sarah, want to say something about the legislation that's promised by Stuart Nash, as I understand it, that you're going to need a resource consent. A farmer is going to need a resource consent to plant out in carbon. And I think that the carbon threat is exaggerated. I mean, we've got about 600 hectares represented, or even less, by overseas investment in carbon forestry, because mostly New Zealand companies on one property outside Wairoa, that's the overseas investment extent in carbon forestry. We're really talking about the ability of farmers to sell their land or plant their land in trees irrespective of the classes of land. Down class 1, 2 and 3, you're not going to have much forestry anyhow. It's just not economic, it's not necessary, and it's not going to happen. There's never going to be trees planted on dairy land, but there is trees going to be planted on that marginal hill country.
Can I interrupt you there, as we've just heard there from Chair from Beef and Lamb, Andrew Morrison, in regards to the incentives pushed into carbon farming without the primary sort of legislation that's driving it being addressed?
Well, I'm not quite sure which end that Andrew Morrison is pushing on this one.
And the incentive to take over valuable land.
Well, taking over valuable land is something I think that New Zealand federated farmers and most of the rural community have cherished for a long time, and that is that if they want to run a whole flock of hippopotamus on their land, that should be their choice, as long as the environmental constraints of discharge are addressed. And so what Andrew Morrison appears to be supporting is an obligation by the government to prevent farmers making those choices as to the best land use that they can make. Now, that may be farming, may continue to be sheep and beef farming, it may be part of the property, or the right to sell the entire property to put into trees. That should be their choice, irrespective of the class of land, because the market will determine which land stays in sheep and beef and which continues, and which is determined has the right to be turned over to forestry.
Don, can I ask you to finish? Do you really believe, honestly, that it's a level playing field in the way that trees has been effectively incentivised towards carbon farming over meat?
Yes. Okay. I mean, if you talk about level playing fields, then you can also point to the free ride that agriculture has generally on greenhouse gas emissions. So that if you look around and say which is a level playing field, it's very difficult to determine that accurately. And if the government has determined that carbon is a commodity that can be sold and traded in the international markets or just the New Zealand market, then that is a government policy to bring in a commodity, and that should be bought and traded the same way as everything else is. So that again goes back to the right. And for Pete's sake, if you have a look at the export earnings per hectare per year out of forestry compared with sheep and beef farming, forestry exceeds it by about 4 times. And it's ahead on the employment rate as well. So if you talk about level playing fields, let's make it a genuine playing field. But first of all, look, sheep and beef farming is not going to disappear. And I think that it needs a major input beyond that Fit for a Better World, such as sheep genetics, such as improvement. I think it's got a great future. It will sit alongside forestry, and there will be less land used for it, and there will be more land used for forestry if we're going to meet our climate change commitments, and that really becomes a bottom line.
Fantastic.
So I agree with Andrew Morrison. We should actually have a greater incentive to get rid of burning fossil fuels. That's the driver of climate change. Trees only fill the gap in between.
There we go. We've come to a consensus here on Serious Country, open hearts and open minds. It's about having a fair and level discussion across all industry. And of course, as we can see there, it's around reducing as opposed to offsetting. I really appreciate your time. Don Carson, Communications Manager for Forestry Owners Association. Sorry to cut you off there, sir. We do have Minister Damien O'Connor lined up to discuss Fit for a Better World, the acceleration roadmap launched today. We'll be back with him after this break. This is Sarah's Country.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy, and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
Now I have it here in front of me, Fit for a Better World, Accelerating Our Economic Potential. You can get, of course, the copy of this roadmap and some further digging in and some bedtime reading, of course, on the Ministry for Primary Industries website. Of course, the vision for the Primary Sector Council was, of course, around a shared and common vision known as Te Taiao, and the bringing together of integrity, guardianship, ingenuity and respect. And joining us now is Minister for Agriculture, Damien O'Connor, who has, as we said there with Peter Brice, been at the Mount Albert Grammar School today. How was that with the children, and what a great platform to launch your roadmap?
It was, and it was holidays, so some of the senior students came back. They were really enthusiastic about it, and spoke to many who were going to Massey or Lincoln, so that was exciting in itself. But look, this is the launch of 3 reports effectively. We had a great turnout of industry leaders. Some had come a long way. They've been involved with it. They understand, what we're trying to do here. And this is just the start of the journey, really. And it was good to get it out. I'd hoped to do that in April, but COVID, has interfered with a lot of things, of course. So it's out there now. And it just really, to tie out and the vision actually captures what most farmers in New Zealand want to do, and that's take good care of the animals, the land, and produce really fine quality products. And then it's a chance now to tell that story.
Obviously I'm not here to be critical of it, because it's been, as you said, a long time coming, and we do need to all jump on board in terms of similar magnetic north together. But just a couple of questions to work through. Te Taiao is a Māori term around guardianship. I just want to understand why such a short runway of a decade when we have continuously talked about we need a longer 50, 100-year plan and vision.
Look, the 10-year thing was really around the action plan that we launched today. Te Taiao is enduring, and I think as it develops, we'll become more entrenched in everything that we do. What we had was a roadmap for the next 10 years. I guess people wanted to know, well, what are we going to do in that next 10-year period? But in fact, if we get this right, then Te Taiao will indeed be enduring, because it is about well-being of all components of our life and our economy. And I don't think there are too many Kiwis, particularly after COVID, that want anything other than that. And so, it's a direction of travel. But, if we just pointed to the 50-year kind of goals and there wasn't anything in the next, 5 to 10 years, then people would say, it's all a bit vague.
You talk a lot around these chapters about transformational opportunities. Now, to transform, you need everybody on board. With this Primary Sector Council, do you feel that you had a representation of all voices at the table?
It wasn't a representative group at all. It was a group of people who had who were lateral thinkers, people who had a passion for the future of our sectors, and who got into a room and argued and scrapped and fought and basically came to a shared vision. And if you just end up with representatives, then you end up with compromise to meet the objectives of those people, and that's sometimes not what you want. This was a clean sheet of paper with a group of really proactive and energetic and lateral thinking, and indeed this is what they came up with. And actually most people, when they think through it, they actually conclude that actually it's not too bad, and it's a really good place to start from.
Yeah, absolutely. And that certainly is what it is, a place to start from. The reason for my question was just about the stakeholder buy-in, so that this filters right down to the daily farm decisions behind the farm gate, and that buy-in in this vision as well.
Look, if you're supplying Silverfin Farms or Alliance, Finlay, even Fonterra now, if you don't buy into their assurance programs that are linked to sustainability, that are linked to good on-farm practice, you won't get the premium. Fonterra announced a 10-cent premium, if you can meet their assurance program. So everyone's moving in this direction, but the question of, whether we can get more value from that if we coordinate that story and market is the thing that we are challenged by. And so that's what we're hoping to do, is to support that. When it comes to good environmental management, we're spending literally hundreds of millions to help, to bring the waterways up to speed, to make sure we've got good biodiversity management. And I think anyone who read the Farm to Fork strategy from the EU, which they're going to spend $100 billion with farmers over the next 20 years, then that is all about biodiversity. It's all about good environmental management, good animal welfare. And if we don't kind of show that we're doing the same thing, we won't get a trade deal with them. So this is actually about meeting the expectations of our future consumers.
And market access, yeah, understand completely. One big part of your report here is around inclusiveness and employing 10% more Kiwis. This is 10,000 more. What I'd like to know is there's a discrepancy there from 6 years ago, and Nathan Guy saying there's 50,000 jobs needed in the primary sector. Why such a small amount to attract when you have constantly, I know, Minister, met with members across the sector on this gaping skill shortage that we have?
Well, I think the 50,000 was probably true, and many of those people have been filled by, migrant workers, and that reality has finished now. I guess we're talking about 10,000 new people, highly skilled people, and indeed I think it will be more. But as I said, with the 10-year plan, let's be realistic about that and head down the right path. And if through success, we use more technology, we have better, higher paid jobs. I'm sure that will go to 20,000 people who are passionate about producing food for a world that wants our product. So look, the sky's the limit in my view, and they are indeed figures that are best target that we can estimate at this point. And I think we can go way beyond that.
Minister, we also have 200,000 people now on the unemployment benefit, and figures out that a third of businesses will continue to lay off staff in New Zealand. It's about a redeployment and the attraction to these particular roles. Are you happy with how some of these initiatives, such as Go Dairy and the attraction to rural contractors, has gone so far?
Rural contractors, all those courses are full up at this point. The Go Dairy, we had a bit of publicity last week. After that was shown on TV, we had 100 people calling in, inquiring about that course. I think what we don't do enough of is actually promote ourselves and the opportunities. We talk to ourselves, we talk round in circles, and we don't get out and spend the money promoting it. And so we just got to try harder. I think there are people out there who want to engage and work in the primary sectors, but they don't know enough about it, and we haven't shouted loud enough.
Yep, no, fair call. Absolutely, 100% on board with that mission, absolutely. So therefore, what's next with regards to seeing out the next couple of months to implement this with stakeholders across the industry?
Look, we've got to start, and as has been pointed out, there's a group of senior government public servants and heading the agencies of MPI, NZTE, and MB, that they're working together along with some industry leaders to get the basics up and running. So we've got a whole lot of money that has come through the budget. We've got ministerial groups looking to make sure that goes in the right place. We will then set up a primary sector group that actually will take charge of this moving forward. And I haven't decided, worked on what is the best structure of that, partly representation, partly inspiration. And then we've got a group that, as the Tataia document says, a group of Māori and Pākehā who can sit down and say, this is the Māori concept of well-being. How do we best protect that? And I've seen what we can do with a 100% pure New Zealand, a brand, a story that we've really successfully developed over time. I'm sure that we can do the same with Tataia, but it will require good understanding, it will require discipline in how we use that, and and good promotion. So there's much to do here, but I think the prize at the end of it is well worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, in regards to the understanding, there has been a lot of people wanting to understand why the word regenerative has been a big part of the vision, and the government's ability to put a framework or definition around this term to be able to embed that within who we are as a farming nation, and the controversy that science has circled around this.
I don't think there's controversy. There's a few people who have their opinions, but, they're entitled to those. I guess, regenerative refers to a whole lot of things across the biological systems. And it's come out of the US, I guess, where they've got they've got massive processing systems around food production and feedlots and all the rest of it. And people are seeing a negative thing. What they call regenerative is basically rotational pastoral grazing when you read a lot of the documents. And we do a lot of that, but we haven't called it anything other than pastoral farming. So if we can connect it with what they are seeking by way of their food products, then that's good. I don't think we should use their definition or we should develop our own concept around what we call regenerative, if we like. And in my view, let's call it Tataia. It's around the values of our production system that say that we actually, when we do this, we care for the soil, we care for the water, we care for the animals, we care for the people. And indeed, as we're seeing in the marketplace now, consumers are willing to pay more for products that they consider are produced in an ethical way.
Damien, to end, I know that you have pointed the finger a lot about industry just getting on and getting it done. And the co-investment of the Primary Growth Partnership was one way, and yours was, of course, the SFF fund. And, of course, the announcement today that further funding, if not doubling the amount going into that to support innovation and innovative commercialised ideas. Do you believe the pathway to getting capital into seed-funded startups in an agricultural industry is easy enough?
Look, it's always challenging for new companies in New Zealand. It's the reality of our capital markets. The banks are willing to put money into houses and some into farms, but not into innovative businesses. And so there's a $300 billion fund that David Parker set up a year ago, actually announced at the field days, that is available for companies that want to get some of that capital. What we've said with the SFFF is that I want to see it at the leading edge and at the innovative area of primary industries, not business as usual. And while there were some really good initiatives with the PGP, there was a lot of it that was business as usual. And so we've really got to keep pushing the boat out there to investigate, what is possible in our farming systems, what's possible with our land use. And only then will we really start to build some opportunities. And whether it be, we've got red kiwi fruit coming on stream, we've got, other things products that can, really generate huge amount of export earnings if we develop them in the right way. And, some of the things that we're getting from our meat products, from dairy, that all build in value on what is a raw material that we have in our country of high quality, and that we think we can get more for.
I was speaking there to Don Carson, who believes that we don't have an issue of adding value here. We need to continue to export logs. That's his one opinion. Do you believe that we're pairing up the secondary industry, our manufacturing industry, and growing that for ongoing export revenue into the future, and a great place for government spend to add value to our primary sector products?
Well, we should be doing more of that everywhere. And if we can get $10 for a product, and if you go to Sinlay, they were rolling out cans of infant formula there, that gave us, $300,000 a tonne for milk powder when, compared to $3,000 a tonne. Of course, that required a lot more capital and investment, but ultimately, the product that left our shores was worth so much more, and I think we've got to do more of that. And in the meat industry, there's been great innovation and some exemplars of that. We've just got to do more.
Okay, how do we do more for the strong wool industry? I know Friday's an exciting day for many of us, Damien.
Look, there are a number of opportunities there. Ron's, talks about, melting wool down and then extruding it out, using it in different products there. You've got people who want it in insulation. You've got people who want it in carpets. And then, if we can soften it up and use it in clothing, many opportunities just completely discoordinated, uncoordinated, disconnected, and we have to bring some unity there. This report will be the start of a process. There are a lot of vested interests in the sector that say things are okay, even when, it's a loss-making proposition for a farmer. And anyone in the wool industry that thinks that anything is right at this point is dreaming and has their head in the sand. So we have to have change. And government can't do this, but we have to encourage and enable it.
Damien, look forward to having a read of that wool report on Friday, but can I just say that one thing that has been good out of the process of waiting for this wool report has been the fact that there has been a New Zealand Council of Wool Interests pull together for the first time and in probably wool's history to collaborate for once and for all. So if anything, that's a positive out of this entire process. So thank you.
Well, it is, and they say they're unified. I'm not quite sure of that, and so there's been a lot of assertions made. There's still a lot of tension and division in the wool industry. If they truly are united, then I welcome that, and I'm happy to work with them. But, my investigations at this point say there's still too much division to get the real momentum that we need, to give wool its proper place in our economy, and that can be, a $1 or $2 billion industry, I believe.
Thank you so much for taking the extra time to stay with us there, Minister Damien O'Connor, Minister for Agriculture, following the Fit for a Better World Acceleration Roadmap launched today. And of course, that's seeing potentially $44 billion or nearly a doubling over the next decade to continue to see primary industry at the forefront of our economic recovery post-COVID-19. I'd love to know your thoughts on the show and, of course, our guests. Of course, any guests that you would like to have on the show, please feel free to send an email to me, Sarah at periummedia.com. Now, of course, that's all we've got time for tonight. I've been enjoying your comments rocking in here, some regulars. Good to see Kerry Allen here. Of course, she is the Secretary for Horticulture and Agricultural Teachers Association. And of course, it would have been very inspiring seeing the work that Peter Brice is doing there at MAGS. As I said, any support the industry can give, the smallest it can be, make sure you get in touch with Peter and reach out and let's support MAGS and what they're trying to do. It's a huge opportunity. Loving to see you watching and from all across the country, Hawke's Bay to Riversdale. Of course, this is Ceres Country, broadcast in alliance with the great people at Farmers Weekly. You can catch us on demand on Farmers Weekly's YouTube channel, as well as, of course, Ceres Country on podcast. We will be back tomorrow night to do it all again from 7 o'clock. Absolutely love it. And thank you to my wonderful producer, Joel Rock, for running the show, not only tonight, but across the rest of the day. It's been an absolute pleasure. Good night, go well, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
This is Ceres Country.